hopefully the presentation starts. I want to quickly take you through a story which began back in 2007 as a result of trying to set up a project where we were going to take a cell therapy into clinic within 5 years. We failed. We definitely failed. We did it in 6. But that project was actually set up by a donation which was given by 2 Americans, because as was the reason Irv and Bob were saying, in the UK, there was no way we would have the access to funds to take a therapeutic from the bench into the clinic. So 2 Americans, thankfully, God bless America, gave me substantial amounts of money to set up the London project to cure blindness, to get a therapeutic into clinic within 5 years. One of those was from California. Some of you may know him, a guy called Kirk Corian. So what I want to do is just take you through that journey and why I'm here today. So the beauty of the eye is it has a very nice window in the front which allows, other than any other organ in the body, to actually see the workings and the biology. And in fact, that red flash which the photographers at the back here tend to moan about, which is red eye, is very dear to my heart because it's actually a reflection of the back of the eye, and it's the seeing part of the eye. It's where all the information, all the light is actually processed. And for you today to actually see these presentations involves an area known as the macula. It's the central visual area. And it's literally 10% of the whole eye. And in fact, an area no bigger than about 1 millimeter is what we have to keep healthy in your lifetime. So as ophthalmologists, we need to ensure the healthy continued state of the macula for you to drive, read, and actually recognize your loved ones. So it's 10% of the eye. You do use the rest. The rest is usually used for partying at night. So that picture doesn't really do justice, though, to the underlying biology. You've got 3 layers. You've got the seeing part of the eye, which is known as the retina, and you've got a carpet, and is a carpet. It's an axminster underneath, a single layer of cells, which is between the seeing part of the eye and a major blood supply at the back called the choroid. And the choroid takes heat away from the RPE because it's the most metabolically active cell in the whole of our bodies. So that RPE is essential to the healthy seeing part of the eye, the neural retina. And it does a lot of functions. I'm not going to go into it. But the reason I want to mention this is to focus that middle layer, because the disease which we're trying to cure is that middle layer of cells that are effective, that die. So what's the disease? The disease is age-related macular degeneration. And what tends to happen is the inability to see centrally and at high visual acuity. And one way of actually detecting this very early in patients is by using very simple grids. They're called Amsler grids, which are actually these lines, horizontal and vertical lines. And what patients describe quite accurately is these distortions and graying out. And because there's a one-to-one correspondence with the outside world and the back of your eye, even with these very simple tests, we know where in that macular region the disease has started to take hold. So what patients see are these distortions. What you should see are straight lines. If these 2 pictures look the same, then you may already have some type of a visual problem occurring at the back of your eye. I was lying. Got ya. You have to drum up a bit of business now and again. Hopefully, these are straight lines, okay? If they're not, please see me, and yep, we've got some business. But this is what patients generally see. They see these distortions. So back in 2007, We wanted to see whether we could actually do something about this for age-related macular degeneration. For the majority of our lives, hopefully, we see very clearly. So on the picture of these two boys, there's the optic nerve head. That's where all the information leaves the actual eye. The macular region has this higher pigmentation. That's the bit we need to keep healthy. There are two forms of age-related macular degeneration, dry and wet. The reason for the distinction will become clear, but what happens in the dry form, you start to get these deposits, these fatty deposits, and they push the top layer, the seen part of the eye, away from that middle layer support, and you start to go blind. 90% of patients suffer from this disease, and even now, clinically, when these patients come in to see you, there's absolutely nothing can be done for these patients. The dry form, then there's the wet form. And it's called wet because you have this bleed. And the bleed is because that big blood supply pushes vessels through that middle layer, and they're very, very leaky. 10% of the patients, but fortunately, about 6 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago, a new drug came onto the market called Lucentis, which was produced by Genentech here in California. And it actually clamps down those bleeds. But only 3 out of 10 patients get some visual benefit, 7 get stabilized, and 1 it fails. But it's very expensive. In the UK, it costs about £1,000 per injection, and those injections have to be given every 4 to 6 weeks for the remainder of the patient's life. And what is clearly coming out of this picture now is you can dry up the bleed, but eventually what happens is it turns into the dry form. So you're not actually doing anything for the underlying disease. So the London project, as it was, the whole concept was that middle layer, that carpet which is essential for the support for the seen part of the eye, can we actually replace the cells? And what we did nearly 6 years ago now was an operation using the patient's own cells. So before going into lunch, here's a bit of a gory video. And this is the back of the eye. And this is the optic nerve, about 1 millimeter, and some scar tissue has been taken away. We're lasering out a patch of RPE peripheral to the macula. So you are blinding the patient in that area, but that part of the eye is used for night vision. You really want a high visual acuity. We're taking off the top layer there, that's the seen part of the eye, the neural retina, and we're going to place it under the macula. I'm not going to run the whole video. So Donald was one of our first patients, and at the time, in the UK, Lucentis was not available. When he came into the clinic, he couldn't read the big A. If Lucentis had been available, at best, he would have got a 3-line improvement. Donald, and you'll see a video from Donald hopefully in a few minutes, has been at 612 now for over 6 years. So that operation restored his vision. And I'll tell you a little story in a minute about Donald. So on the left here was the big problem, is this atrophy at the back of the eye. But what we want, and this is the patch which we put in Donald of his own RPE. But we want to produce a patch of cells which we can deliver to a patient, which is an outpatient procedure. It has to be done in less than an hour, and it has to be RPE taken from somewhere else. And that's where we came to use human embryonic stem cells. We used a number of sources, but these were by far the best. And as you've already heard from René, the inner cell mass, which makes up the human embryonic stem cell, forms every cell in our body. And to our surprise, we could easily turn those human embryonic stem cells into the eye cell we wanted, which was that carpet, that middle carpet. So on the left, you see a biopsy from a 17-year-old, and on the right, you see what we can produce from human embryonic stem cells. We had another problem, though. We had to put back the underlay of that carpet, not just the cells, but the underlay. So we had to come up with engineering a whole patch. So we had a disease team. This was the inspiration in terms of my interest with CERN, was we brought together in 2005 clinicians, scientists, engineers, and the facilities to allow us to do this and accelerate this to clinic. And this is what Bob and CERN have achieved with the Disease Team Awards. We, unfortunately, didn't have that opportunity at the time when we set up the London project. So you have to go through a whole regulatory process, and one of those is animal models. So you can't take your friendly rat to your optometrist. They will run a mile if you ask them to test their vision. But in this case, we actually tested what is called, grandly named, the Royal College of Surgeons rat, which has a similar problem to age-related macular degeneration. So here is how you test a rat's vision. You rotate black and white lines, and if it can see those lines, it tracks them. It's not a learnt behavior, it's an automatic behavior. So that's a normal Royal College of Surgeons rat. The next one is, oh, it's the same. Right, well, I'll have to give you the, I have to show you the transplant one. So this guy had human RPE and should have gone blind, but actually went 2 years with good vision. So actually, if you're a rodent at the moment, it's a good time to be a rodent because we can really cure you. Okay, let's hear it for the rodents. Okay, so this is the operation we are going to perform in January of next year. So we will remove the fluid at the back of the eye. We will lift that top layer and put a patch of RPE in the macular region. We have full clinical trial approval now. So where we were hoping it would take us 5 years, it actually took us 6. Bless the UK regulators, they really took us through quite a process. But there's the patch. Amazingly, this procedure took us 45 minutes. And in fact, nearly 70% of patients at Moorfields Eye Hospital would have this procedure awake. If it was me, knock me out, but those patients have them awake. So we are going to do a phase 1, phase 2 therapeutic trial. It's not a safety, it's a therapeutic trial for the following reason. We're going into a very specific group of patients with age-related macular degeneration. They have what's called RPE rips. So that carpet, that underlay, has ripped, and there's bare membrane. There's no cells at all. These patients, literally before they had the rip, were driving, were still good visually. Literally 6 weeks after this rip, they'll go blind. So we are going to put the patch in these patients and get evidence, not just of safety, but of efficacy within the first clinical group. The whole idea is to accelerate this whole process. So in the UK, we have nearly 700,000 severe cases, and in Europe, it's millions. In the US, you have approximately 7 million. So we've already heard about the use of human embryonic stem cells. We have banks in Scotland. Don't ask me why we put it in Scotland. But it's in Scotland and in the US. We have a bank in the US as well. But it is one bank which has been produced from one human embryonic stem cell line. So for a population which covers nearly 30 million, we're actually doing it from the use of one embryonic stem cell line. We don't have to go back. I am going to bring some socialist information here in terms of cost, health, benefit, in particular because of the NHS, which is a social healthcare system. But we did 40 patients using their own cells at a cost to the London project of about £160,000. It costs £15,000 a year to keep someone blind. You know, that's a World Health number. 16 patients recovered vision over 8 years, okay, due to that operation. We can't do that operation on the NHS because it's too long. That's why we wanted to devise the new patch. But for those 16 patients, The NHS charged us 160k. To the NHS, it was a saving of nearly £2 million, and that's with 16 patients. Do the maths on that in terms of 700,000 patients. This is a huge societal benefit. So Donald came into the clinic about 2 months ago, actually brought his granddaughter in. So after us going through this 8 years with him and tracking him for 8 years and doing the operation, his major benefit was he taught his granddaughter how to shoot rabbits, which, great, there you go. Well worth that one. But what is important to me is that, in fact, because, as Irv was saying, we've had an ongoing collaboration with CERM, that actually that technology is now transferred already, and the California project to cure blindness is already here. And this year, a filing will be put into the FDA because we've got a lot of background with the UK. It's been in rats, it's been in pigs, and it's been in bricks. So hopefully the FDA will definitely give us the approval. So the London project is transferred to California. I'm at UCSB, and it involves a great group of people, Mark and mine at USC, Caltech, City of Hope, and obviously UC California. So the California project to cure blindness has benefited from the insight of CERM to bring together a disease team which will accelerate what's happening. So again, as in the Irv's work, the UK is working together, but that's because CERM has had the vision to actually include other countries in this endeavour. Thanks very much.